Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk Life. When I tell you today's episode is about to be powerful, I mean powerful. I'm sitting down and talking with Brea Baker. She is a writer who has been working on the front lines for almost a decade. First as a student activist and now as a national and global strategist. In that time, she has contributed to dozens of electoral and advocacy campaigns, including the 2017 Women's March, where she served as the youngest national organizer, the 2018 student walkouts against gun violence, and so many more. In addition, Bria advises storytellers and industry leaders on making content that builds collective imagination. For her work in the coalition with other activists and organizers, Bria has been recognized as the 2017 Glamour Women of the Year, and she has a BA in political science from Yale University, where she's held internships with the U.S. Department of State, Public Defender Service, and served as the president of Yale's NAACP chapter and co-director of the AIDS Walk New Haven. She has so many upcoming projects and passions, and I'm so excited to be sitting down with her. So I am so excited to welcome Bria to the show.
So much for having me.
Hi, Bria. No, I am so glad you are here.
Likewise. It's been months in the making. So this is it's going to be beautiful.
Yes. No, I'm seriously so inspired by everything that you do. And I've just recently, probably within the past year, found your work and been following everything that you're doing. And I see so much passion and just purpose in everything that you put your hands on and your words on. And I'm just so excited to hear all about it and hear how you got to this journey, how you really started making sure people heard your voice, and saw you and really saw you for who you are, heard you for who you are. And I'm just excited to have you on the show to share your light with my audience.
Yes, thank you so much just for saying that. Like, those affirmations mean the world to me. And likewise, though, I think that it's just so beautiful that you extend your space for people like me, but also that you're just cultivating environments and community for dope Black women and women of color. And this is going to be such a perfect collaboration.
Yes, no, I'm excited. So you are a dynamic writer, a speaker, a feminist, girl, you're everything, right? Multi-hyphenate.
Yes, definitely.
Do you think that there is a singular experience in your life that really sparked your passion for making sure your voice and your words were heard and felt in this society?
Yeah, I mean, so I definitely grew up as part of that Trayvon generation who, were coming of age right after he had been killed. And I was 17 graduating high school when he was killed. And so it very much, that's a time of your life when people are telling you the world is your oyster and, just go out there and dream and be all that you can be. But it didn't feel like that's what I was seeing on my screen and what was happening in other parts of the country in Florida. And I think that I was still hopeful, though, that oh my gosh, well, people are speaking out. And so I think that change is going to happen. And I think the moment was really not his murder, but really the acquittal of George Zimmerman, where I was like, what's going on? Like that, I was so shocked. And now I look back and I'm like, girl, I don't know why you were shocked, because now we see that happen so often and we get so disappointed so often. But in that moment, I just remember thinking like, oh, we did everything we were told to do. We protested peacefully. We spoke up. We trusted the justice system to do what they said they were going to do. And it didn't do that. And it let this man walk for killing a teenage boy. And so to me, that just felt like, oh, well, what is this kind of that world for not just myself, but for my younger brother, for my family, for anybody who looks like me and is a part of my community? How come we can't get our slice of the American pie? And I think that's when like my rage just bubbled over, and I just started going deep into understanding, how do we get out of this cycle?
Mhm.
Because I can't keep going through the world and accepting things like that as they are. And I think it's Angela Davis that says, you have to accept the things that you can't change, but change the things that you can't accept. And I think that was the moment where I was like, yeah, I can't accept that. And I
And
have to be a part of this work. It can't be just like something I do once a year. Like, I need to figure out how I stop this violence from happening. And I'm still trying to figure it out because it's still
yeah,
happening.
you expressed that, your breaking point, the
Hmm.
breaking and beginning, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you were like, wait, this is my breaking point, but at the same time, all right, I got to do something, because clearly
Right.
everything we were taught to be enough
Hmm.
to, walk the right path, and by
Hmm.
whatever those standards are, it was done, and we still didn't receive justice. So
Yeah.
for you, it was really important to not only share to others that, hey guys, there really may not be justice, or what we thought was justice in
Hmm.
this country. So when you came to that conclusion, what
Hmm.
what did your next steps look like? Did you start organizing groups? Were you finding other people to reach out to that were
Hmm.
doing what you wanted to do in the spaces? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was definitely that latter situation that you talked about. I think for me, it was just like, I need to figure out who also feels as angry as, um, in some ways, like hopeless, but they're doing something about it. So they're not hopeless. They do see an opportunity to make a difference. And I definitely was like, I need to find those people and follow them. And at that time, I wouldn't have considered myself an organizer. I was showing up to protest that somebody else was organizing. And I was just like, I just want to be in the rooms wherever that is. So I'm from New York. I was like going to be out in the streets every single day, especially when Eric Garner was killed not soon after. And so I was literally out in the streets all the time. Then my sister went to Howard. Whenever I visited her in DC, I was joining a protest. I was just trying to be in the scene. And at that same time, I was also reading a lot, because I had a friend in my life, Eric, who was recommending books to me and was just saying, like, this feeling that you have, our ancestors and elders before us have had that same feeling. I want to
Yes.
introduce you to the autobiography of Malcolm X. I want to introduce you to Assata Shakur. I want you to read the works of the Black Panthers. And so reading them in some ways made me feel like, oh my gosh, wait, but if they feeling how I'm feeling, then nothing has changed. So
Yes.
what is going on? But then at the same time, I was able to see that they were not waiting for somebody to give them permission to make change. So at the same time that they're protesting and saying, we need the president to do X, Y, and Z, they're going
Mhm.
out into their community and saying, well, our kids got to eat. So we're going to set
Yeah,
up a free breakfast program because our kids got to eat. And if the government's not going to feed them, we have to. Or we're going
yes.
to set up these clinics. We're going to be cop watching, and we're going to stand on patrol. And if a police officer is brutalizing someone, we're going to be there and be a part of their self defense. And
Mhm.
so I think it inspired me to say, like, oh, well, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of these answers are already out there. It's just that we have never had, honestly, the like real investment in these solutions. So that
Mhm.
was like my starting point for sure, was just like, let me read up as much as I can. And I'd always been a reader, but like growing up, it was like fiction and, romance novels and stuff like that. And this is the first
Mhm.
time I'm like really getting into like autobiographies and
Yeah.
theory and stuff like that while I'm going to the protest and learning things. And then it got to a point where I was like, okay, I like what this group is doing, but I also have ideas about how we can make it even better or even more relevant to people my age. And
Wow.
that's when I would say that I started like organizing things myself, or trying to like join those groups and not just showing up to the protest, but saying, hey, like outside of this one protest, what are y'all doing throughout the week? And can I support you
Yes.
in that?
Mhm. And what would you say to someone that maybe hasn't explored these options yet, but really wants to? What options do you feel like they have? Like you said, you were going out there and seeking, those options, but you also went to those organizations like, hey, wait, I have some incredible ideas and I want to implement
Yeah.
them. What do you say to somebody that hasn't navigated that space yet?
Yeah, I would say don't be like, do not be afraid to put yourself out there. It will require you being out of your comfort zone. But I think activism in general will require you being outside of your comfort zone. Like I've been
Mhm.
arrested at protests, I've been
Wow.
yelling in the faces of Congress members, and like doing those sorts of things really do require you to really feel like 10 toes down in what you're talking about. And that's
Mhm.
why it felt important for me to be reading up, because I didn't want to be at a protest. And if someone came to me and was like, you know what? I'm gonna give you the budget you need. I'm gonna give you the control you need. What you gonna do for your people? And I
Wow.
don't know the answers. You know, like
Right.
if I got
Right.
myself in a scenario where I had the control, I wanted to have ideas of what I could do with that. And
Mhm.
so I would say definitely don't be afraid to step out of that comfort zone.
Mhm.
For me, that really did start by just attending the protest. I didn't need to talk to anybody else. I would go with a couple of my girlfriends. We already knew each other, and that was it. And then when I got comfortable with that, it was like when I see the people who are on the blowhorn or on the microphone after the protest, hey, what group are you a part of? Is there a way that I can sign up as a volunteer and kind of connect with that? And depending on what part of the country you're in, that might be easier for you. Like
Mhm.
in New York, there are so many activist groups, so it's really like you could pick from all of them. But if you're in a
Mhm.
smaller rural community, there
Yeah.
might not be any. And in that case, you have to be willing to be the one to start that up.
Yes.
And that was definitely a feeling that I got when I got to my campus. I went to a very predominantly white university,
Mhm.
and there were some black student organizations already, but a lot of them were focused on what was happening on our campus only. And I
Okay.
really wanted to understand, like, well, what can we do that's on our campus, but also our school is situated in a very black and brown city. Like,
Mm.
how can we be a part of addressing policing in New Haven, Connecticut? How can we be a
Mhm.
part of things that are happening statewide? And we didn't have an NAACP chapter at the time, and I helped revive it and like get it back together. So those are some of the things that I did to get into those spaces. But above all, I think how you do it doesn't matter so much as you doing it, like you
Yes.
getting out there. And I think sometimes it feels scary because especially if your mindset is like, oh, I want to change the world. It's like, well,
Right.
where do I start in changing the
Right.
world? But if you start with your community, it's
Yeah.
so much easier because no one knows your community like you do. Whether
Yeah.
that's saying, oh, my church, I want to change my church and make sure that they are speaking about Black Lives Matter and racial justice more.
Mhm.
Whether that's my school, I want to see what's going on with our curriculum. I want to see what kind of speakers we're bringing in. I want to see how many Black teachers we have. Like
Mhm.
those are the kinds of things you can start on super, super locally, and it'll
Yeah.
build your confidence for you to then decide, you know what, now I want to go to DC and be a part of this march, or I want to
Right.
help plan this in the biggest city in my state. And you can kind of scale up to it.
I completely relate to what you're talking about on both sides of the spectrum because I'm from a very small community in town in North
Yeah.
Carolina. And I think you can relate to that as well. But living in New York, I saw firsthand, what not only Black and Brown communities coming together
Yeah.
are capable of, but when I was out there, when I'm seeing white people down here, with
Right.
us,
Right.
and that I think for me, I was like, wow, not only can we start a movement, lead the movement, but
Yeah.
bring along people that don't even look like us, that aren't from
Yeah.
the same background. And that's really to me where I think for us, it's like when we see us together, it's like, okay, here we are. But when you see
Yeah.
them with us, it's like, oh wait, hold up, we might be
Okay,
making
we doing something.
we're
Yeah.
doing something here, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I really needed to see that in New York
Mm,
because I think for the past few years, it's been really hopeless. Like I've
mhm.
just been like, all right, like when is this not going to be happening? And I think
Yeah.
it was really nice to see that in New York. So I was.
1,000,000%. But even in North Carolina, like in
Mhm,
2020, I think a lot of people think, the South is really backwards and whatnot. But during the
mhm,
2020 protests, in Raleigh, they were like doing protests outside of the courthouse. They were taking
mhm.
down Confederate statues and
Yes.
flags and stuff. And I was just like, wow, okay, North Carolina was coming up, and it wasn't just Black North Carolina. Like I was just like, oh, this is where I'm noticing like this might be different, because
Yeah.
I'd never seen like white people in the South coming out and deciding that that was their problem too. And we
Mm,
do need more of that. We really do. And like it requires them to realize that it's not just a Black issue. Like
yes.
it's an issue that affects Black people most, but it's an American issue if we have inequality, if we still have the legacy of slavery, if we still have white supremacy going around, because it was white allies and activists also being killed in Charlottesville,
Mhm.
being threatened. Like everybody is going to be victimized by that system at some point if they are not the wealthy white men that the system is trying to keep in power.
Yes. And, with all of that being said, you're so right. But also for you, especially as an organizer, for you, what does like a glimpse of hope look like or feel like for you?
I think for me, when I see people who just did not agree at all are now like, okay, I see where you're like those kinds of changes, they're so much smaller, but
Mhm,
that's where real change happens. Because I think there's
mhm.
a lot of people who think like, oh, for us to get to an equitable society, we need the president to do 10 things.
Right.
And the president could do those 10 things tomorrow and we would still have inequality
Mhm.
because we have people whose minds still believe that certain people are inferior, or
Yes.
that there's no issues here, or that it's a threat to their power that we are talking about these things. And so when I see, children having conversations with parents and educating their parents, when I
Mhm.
see, elected officials actually talking to the people who got them elected, like those sort of micro conversations really prove to me that we're getting outside of the echo chamber. Because I mean,
For
even like the name of the show, Let's Talk Life, right? Like there's a lot of people who are talking at each other and not with each other or
yes.
to each other. And when
Mm,
I see people having conversations that are resulting in like a changed perspective is when I'm like, okay, we're doing this, we're getting there. I also think that sometimes we believe that somebody else has to deliver us what freedom looks like or liberation looks like. And when I
yes.
see people taking it into their own hands on a very local level, that just inspires me so freaking much.
Mhm.
I think Los Angeles was the like ultimate version of this, because during 2020, all eyes are on the presidential election, but Los Angeles had a lot of ballot measures, which are very, very local measures, so that when you go to vote, everybody in that region gets to vote yes or no on something. And then that just becomes a law. Like you don't have to go through any other channels. It's the
Wow.
ballot measure in and of itself. And so they put through a lot of ballot measures that were focused on transforming our criminal justice system, specifically in LA County. And it was so mind blowing the way that they were really rethinking their own city and their own county, and just
Mm,
saying, like, whoa, currently we spend how many $1 billion on police? That's got to change. Let's put some of that towards youth development. Let's put some of that towards job creation. Let's put some of that towards housing people. And like they were actually able to win a lot of measures. And it inspired me because I was like, this is an example of you not needing to wait until somebody in the White House or somebody in Congress or DC says yes. You can do
yes.
it in your hometown. And it literally inspired me because I went back to my hometown and was like, y'all, we got to see if we could get some of these ballot measures on our ballots. Like, I
Mhm.
want to be voting on stuff like that too. So that's
Right.
one thing that really inspired me. And then in Georgia, when we flipped the Senate, that was like massive. Like getting Senator Raphael Warnock in office, a Black man in a Southern Senate seat, is like huge. And it
Yes.
was such a testament to the work of Black women in Georgia, not just Stacey Abrams, but also Usain Mfo and Latasha Brown and so many other people. But it was also like, see, we can win if
Yes.
there is an exciting enough candidate running, and if that candidate is really committed to speaking for us and with us.
Yes. And I think to your point, it also just it's a testament to the power in people.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you really just bring it down to like a local level, but just a people level,
right, yeah,
these are human beings,
exactly,
we're
yeah,
human beings. It has to be more than just about the money for everyone.
exactly. It
Like it
has to,
has to
yes.
be.
And
And
there
I
are some
think
people, it's so unfortunate because you can tell that that is all that they're focused on. All they're
yeah.
focused on is profit and getting themselves rich and setting their families up.
Mhm,
But when you can relate to people, like everybody has certain motivations. Even
mhm.
for those people who they're like, well, I'm just trying to be a billionaire. Why? So I could set my family up and keep us safe. Okay, so you
Mhm.
want safety, but do you need
Right,
$1 billion to get safety? Or do we need to talk together about what keeps us safe and what we can change about our country so that we all feel safe? Same
right.
thing with like, yeah, so I think a lot of times it's easier to just assume why someone believes something.
Mhm,
But when you
mhm.
really boil it down, then you can say, okay, now you believe that's your only path to that. But what if I told you that our relationships with one another can get us there? And
Yeah,
that like there was a time, I mean, even in the Black community, even when we were facing segregation, there was a time where we could leave our doors unlocked because we just trusted our neighbors that much.
yeah.
There was a time where our schools, it was just full of Black teachers. Our hospitals were full of Black doctors. And like we had just so much trust in one another that
Mhm,
even when we knew we were up against a common enemy in segregation, we
mhm,
had community. And
mhm.
now you have people who have bars on their windows because they don't trust nobody who lives
Yeah,
near them. And that's
yeah.
such a shame to me. But it also means like we're not talking to each other and we don't believe
Right.
that we are people, especially because social media makes us believe we're talking at computers and bots all
Yes.
the time. So we talk to each other crazy, Twitter fingers or whatever. But it's like
Uh-huh.
if you remember, like I'm talking to a person who at the
Mhm.
end of the day wants many of the same things that I want, and I just got to get us to agree on how we get there, then it makes it a lot more it's a lot less uncomfortable to
Yes.
broach those conversations because it's like I know what you want, you just believe that to get there you got to step on me, and I have to help you see
Wow.
that we can get there together and a lot faster if we help each other.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing point because I think, like you said, we could be so much farther along if not
Hmm.
only we reach a certain point and then hold the door open for our brothers and sisters over here,
Right.
or let them in, then let's get up on the ladder and help each other. It's like, let's
Exactly.
what is happening here? And I would love to see more of that. I think I've seen really great examples of that. But I think we can do more.
A
I
lot
know
better.
we can do
Yes. Yes, we can. For real.
I want to hear about your writing. I want to hear about what you've worked on in the past that you're so proud of, but I also want to hear about maybe
Mm.
what you're currently working on or some amazing things that you have in the cut for the future.
Yes.
Like let's hear about all of it.
Yeah, so writing has been so new for me because again, I think I first of all, I went to college and I was a physics major. I was
Okay.
like STEM. I was not even in the zone.
Oh,
And
okay.
then it was because of the protests my freshman year that I was like, I switched my major to political science. And a lot of my motivations was just like, how can I help get the word out? And initially, I thought the only way to do that was like through protest. And then I was interviewed by Elle magazine because my campus was having some major student organizing and protests around a lot of things that could be its own podcast episode, honestly. But they had interviewed me about that experience and afterwards were like, well, if you're ever, if there's ever anything else that you want to write about, let us know. And one, that experience was so formative, and I'm just so grateful to the editor Leah Chernikoff who gave me that opportunity because she really saw something in my young 21-year-old angry self and was just like, I want to give you a platform. And I had never published anything before that, like anything before that outside of like social media posts, blog posts here and there. And she was just like, I see something in you, and I would love to give you a platform to talk about that. And so I started writing for Elle, just on and off, nothing too major. But it was a really good opportunity for me to just have an outlet for my anger. And
Right.
then to realize, like, oh, wait, this is another form of organizing because people want to, read an update about this case that's happening in the news, that thing that they just saw on social media. And instead of just reading something that's like, oh, this is sad,
Right.
I could write an article that's like, this is messed up. This is why it's messed up. This is the legacy of why it's messed up. And here's something you can do about it. And so I started writing articles about that. And my intention was always to end with a call to action because I didn't want someone to read the article and then be like, wow, that was interesting, and then forget about it. I
Mhm.
wanted them to be able to say, oh, great. She gave me a petition I could sign. She told me what I can talk to my representative about. She told me where I could donate some money. And it's like, give people things to do because
Mm.
I realized that a lot of us do want change. We just don't know where to start.
Right.
And so that was like my entry point into writing was like, how can I use articles as a tool for giving people something to do. And
Yes.
then over time, I was just like, okay, I'm a big reader. I told you that, reading books was a huge part of my activist journey. And
Mhm.
so the more that I began writing articles, I also began writing like reading lists, like recommendation lists. And so I would do like, oh, these are 25 books you should read for Black History Month. These are 10 books you should read for Women's History Month. And just reminding people that what they see on social media is just like scratching the surface, but there's
Right.
so much more information out there that they can tap into. And I
Mhm.
just loved connecting people to books that would help them understand the world we live in and remind them like, you're not crazy. Yes,
Right.
this world is really messed up, but there's also a lot of things that we can do about that. And here are some things that some people are saying. And so those were like my entry points into writing. And I have loved it so much. I've been able to connect with people in really beautiful ways. Now I write for Elle and Harper's Bazaar, which is really incredible. And the
Awesome.
beautiful thing I love about it is those two are not political publications. They're
Really?
fashion magazines,
Yeah.
like they're beauty, fashion, women, all that stuff.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
for them to invest in political stories that really I almost never write about fashion,
Yeah.
is so beautiful to know that like we're remembering that politics affects all of our lives and
Right.
everybody should care about it. So I think
Absolutely.
that's just what I'm proud about is like reaching audiences that maybe weren't going to L.com to learn about politics, but they're gonna get it. And
Right.
they're gonna get it in a way that is, exciting and accessible to them. And they're gonna be able to share that wider and start a conversation. And I think the one of the most recent moments when I realized that like, oh, this does matter is
Mhm,
that there was a librarian at Northwest University who
mhm.
set up an abolitionist library where it was like a bunch of resources for people who wanted to understand the defund police movement and just like get more context than what they were seeing on social media. And he included one of my articles for Harper's Bazaar that I wrote called Why I Became an Abolitionist. And he included it in the introduction because he was saying that, like, articles like that help people understand like why they should rethink the world around them. And it was so accessible and all this stuff. And so to see that it had resonated like that with someone, so much
Mhm.
so that he added it to a database that he was building for his students, was just
Wow.
like, this is what I do it for. And it
Yeah.
just like literally warmed my heart so much. So that just meant the world to me.
Mhm.
And now I'm writing my own book, which is like also surreal because I'm such a book nerd. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I get the chance to write a book and sort of be the change that I want to see. And Toni Morrison has this quote that's like, if there's a book you want to read and it doesn't exist, then you have to write it. And I
There you
think that's the place that I got. So it's going to be a book called Rooted: The American Legacy of Land Theft and the Modern Movement for Black Land Ownership.
go.
And a lot of it stems from my family in North Carolina's history with land ownership and wanting to understand like why do so few Black people own land? Why do so few indigenous tribes and communities own land? And like how did that set up the racial wealth gap that we have today? So I'm really excited to get into it, to share some of my family story, but also to remind people that like it's not just policing. So, there's some people who believe like, okay, if we could stop police from killing people, we would have equality. And that's not true. We have
Mhm.
so many wealth gaps and we can't outwork them. Like we know that
Right.
like Black women make 60 cents for every dollar that a white man makes.
Mhm.
And part of that is because that white man is inheriting money from his family that we are not able to inherit from our
Right.
families. And we need to get to a place where we understand like, well, where did your inheritance come from? And off of whose back did it come from? And so that's
Right.
what I'm excited for the book to get into.
I am so excited for that. When can we expect that?
So that is definitely it's gonna be a little while,
Okay.
2023. I'm still in the process of writing it. But I mean, also like we've seen in this pandemic, we're in year 3 of this pandemic.
Yes.
So time flies. So
Yes.
I think 2023 will be here before any of us know it. But I am like pretty deep into the writing process. And as it takes shape, I'm just like, I want this out into the world so bad. So
Yeah.
hopefully very, very soon. And it's going to be coming out through One World Books,
Okay.
which for people who don't know, it's an imprint of Penguin Random House. And they just put out 1619 Project, which I actually have right here.
Oh, yeah,
So they
sure.
just put out this book,
Amazing.
Nicole Hannah Jones, and also
That's
Ibram Kendi's works, and a bunch of really, really amazing authors. So they are always pushing that envelope, and I'm excited that they believe in this project.
I'm so excited for that for you. Girl, take your time. Take your
Yes.
time on it. Like, we're not rushing it because we know it's gonna be good.
Yes. Thank you,
Just
sis. I appreciate
circle back
that.
around once it's here, and then
Oh,
we can
definitely.
really
I'm
talk
hitting you
about
up
it.
like, can we do another episode? I'm definitely hitting
Yes.
you up.
Please do that. With your platform, you talked a little bit about how you do have this platform, and it's not just policing, it's you're talking about all aspects of how we have been affected as a people. So I know that with having an opinion and having a voice, even no matter what the topic, right? It could be anything. With having this platform, have you experienced negative feedback, or have you experienced some challenges in figuring out which opinions to kind of listen to, or what feedback
Mhm.
to listen to versus like feedback where you're just like, all right, I'm good on that. I
Yeah.
don't have to receive that. I don't have to own what you just said to me.
Mm.
How have you navigated that?
Oh, this is such a good question. And I love the way that you frame that ending part. Like, I don't have to own this. Like
Yes.
that's your issue. I think one, I definitely get lots of feedback and pushback to different things.
Mhm.
Um, and the way that I filter it out is like, are you a part of my community? Because I do think it's important to feel accountable to your
Mm,
people. And
mhm,
sometimes I see leaders who will label any negative criticism or pushback as trolls, and I'm
mm,
like,
mhm.
not everybody is a troll, though.
I
Some
agree.
people are asking you to really think about who you're leaving out of a conversation, or
Mhm.
to just do more research, because there are some people who get, they have a lot of followers and they say a lot of things, but they're not researching it, they're not vetting it. So it's important for you to really question, like, where's the information that this person is telling me? Where is it coming from? And
Right.
so to me, if someone is asking a question for me and it feels like it's in good faith, like, hey, where did you get the information from this? Can you drop your resources? I will always answer that kind of question,
Okay.
because if I believe in what I'm saying, I should be able to back it up. So when I
Right.
see people get defensive to questions like that, to me, that tells me you didn't do your research before you talked, and now you don't know what to say. So that's one thing. If somebody's just asking like, "Hey, where did you get this information from?" I'm always happy to like share those resources. If someone's saying like, "Hey, I really disagree with this," I then take that at more of a like, okay, on a case by case basis.
Okay.
Some people are just, they, like I said before, with Twitter fingers, they talk at you as if they're talking to a computer. And
Mhm,
in some ways, I think our technology sets people up like that, that they
mhm.
forget they're talking to a real person. And that has literally happened. People will be in my DMs talking crazy, and I respond to them, and they're like, "I didn't know you were going to read this." And I'm
Yeah.
like, why would you send it if you didn't want someone to read it? To me, if I send
Yeah.
you something, I can't assume you will respond back to me, but I'm hoping you will, because I
Right.
want to be in a conversation with you. So that is definitely something that has happened, where people have like said something to me and then are shocked that I respond to them.
Mhm,
But I try not to respond in a way that is like super negative.
mhm.
One, because I know that I was in a place when I didn't know anything. And when
Yes.
I first came into this work, my intentions were in the right place, but I didn't know a lot. I knew that I wanted a world where people like Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Sandra Bland and like, I wanted a world where those people were alive, and I didn't know how to get there. And there were
Mhm,
things that I was saying online that I hadn't really thought all the way through because I was young. And
mhm.
especially when I see young people, like, you're like a teenager coming of age on social media. The kinds of questions I would have been asking on social media as a teenager would have
Yeah.
been embarrassing too. So I try to have empathy for people and to say, like, if they're responding and they're just like, "Oh, this is stupid," and da da da. Why do you think it's stupid? Because, and I really explain where I'm coming from. And if they're still pushing back and not responding to what I've said, then I stop the conversation. Because
Mhm,
if you are interested in a back and forth, then you should be able to have a principled conversation. So if I say, "I believe this because A, B, and C," and you only respond to A, but you
mhm.
ignore B and C, to me that is, you only are interested in being right, not in us having a real conversation. And I don't want
Right.
to go back and forth with someone like that. But someone who's actually willing to like talk back and forth with me and explain where they're coming from and hear where I'm coming from, I'm always down for that conversation. Even when those people talk crazy, like the anti-vaxxers be in my comment section, the,
Uh-huh. Yes.
when I talk about black women and feminist issues, black men be in my comment section. "Oh, this
Oh,
is
wow.
divisive, and you got to remember you're black first, and why are you talking about women's issues and letting those white women tell you this and that?" And I really try to explain to people like where I'm coming from and hope that by treating them like a person, they'll remember to treat me like a person. But
Yes.
at the end of the day, I cannot own and like take responsibility for everybody's thing. And
Mhm.
so my go-to when I'm like done with the conversation is to recommend a further resource and tell them to follow back with me after they've read that. Because also sometimes it gets to a place where I'm like, I know too much about this topic to argue with someone who has only read one social media post about it. And I am not about to sit here and argue with you as if I have not been doing this work for a decade. Like I've
That's what she
literally been doing this
said.
work since 2012. So I'll be like,
Yeah.
you know what? I would love to keep having this conversation with you. I need you to read this book or watch this documentary first and then come back to the comment section. And if you're not willing to do
Girl,
that, then it's over.
we have nothing further to discuss.
Nothing to talk about. Nothing. And it's good though, because sometimes
Yeah.
that's what people want. And then they watch it and they're like, okay, my bad. Or they delete their comments because they realize they were wrong or whatever the case may be. But then it's like, now I gave you a rabbit hole you can go down. I gave you one documentary and hopefully you keep learning more and keep growing. But
Mhm.
I can't waste my energy in comment sections. And I've said that all the time. Like, we're not gonna get free in nobody's social media comment section. Now,
Yeah.
I believe that you can educate people in the comment section, but I'm not going to spend 90% of my energy fighting with people online if
Mhm.
they are not willing to pick up a book, pick up a free streaming service. Like, it's
Period.
too, information is too accessible for me to argue with you over things that are Googleable.
Yes. Yes.
So that's my go to at
Girl,
this point.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. And that's something, first of all, I'm very, very inspired and proud that you have that stance because I think it takes, like you said, someone that knows what they're talking about. Like, you know
Mhm.
what you're talking about. You've
Right.
done your homework. This is you. This is who you are at this point. So for somebody else that's coming to you to challenge you, but in a way that they don't even have the resources to back up their argument. And I'm sure at this point you're probably an expert of pointing or like spotting it out when people you're like, okay,
Right.
let me throw
Right.
my little like jazz at them and then just see how they come back and then I'll assess if this is even
Exactly.
worth it. So I think that's just an amazing stance to have. And I definitely can learn something from that as well. And I know
Mhm.
other people can too. I've actually had to really work on that myself
Mm.
this year. And I'm really passionate about just like if someone asks me something or they ask me advice or just like if they want my opinion on a topic, I'm going to give it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then it almost turns into this like, I'm over here, like I go home and I'm crying because I'm like,
Right.
I get my point across. Like,
Right.
I hope they didn't like think I was like me, you know, like
In the shower, like, "Oh, I should have said
I
this,"
should
and
have said this. There was so many times I was just overthinking not only my opinion, but my voice, and just like what I could offer to a conversation. And that's
Right.
just like a human reaction. But I was talking to my good friend and she was just like, London, you're at a point where and this is not an ego thing, but you're above this. You're above
Yeah, no, for real.
arguing with, somebody who's not even trying to understand you or
Yes.
understands the point here. If someone asks you
Mhm.
a question and they're not trying to gain understanding, what are they asking a question for? And
Right.
that's up to me to discern and up to me to once I discern what their angle is,
Yeah.
choose how now I want to respond and or react or not react,
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah, and to your point about understanding people's angles, sometimes that will be my response. If
Yes.
someone is coming at me and I just feel like, I feel like you are more focused on catching me in a mistake than you
Mhm.
are about having a real conversation, I will literally like reflect them back to themselves. Like, you know what? I feel like this conversation is getting to a place where you're more interested in proving yourself to be right than about having
Mhm.
this conversation. So I'm going to step away. But if that changes and you're interested in something deeper, let me know because then we can have that conversation. But what I'm not going to
Yes.
do is, and then sometimes people will be like, you don't want to be called out in that way. So then they're like, oh, shoot, I was going too hard. Or, oh, shoot, like, yeah, it's like, what is the purpose of it? For
Yeah.
me, I don't want to just talk to talk. I want
Yes.
to talk because I want to convince someone else or have my mind evolved and grown. Like, I don't believe that I'm too good to be taught something too. But if
Mhm.
your focus is on like, gotcha, that's not the kind of conversation that I want to have. I want to
Right.
have conversations that are solutions oriented. And if you're not solutions oriented, let me remind you of that. Hey,
Yes.
I'm here about getting free. This conversation is not getting me any closer to freedom. So I'm going to step away and you can continue having this conversation by yourself. And
Yes.
then people are like, well, damn, So like, I do think sometimes that's the approach that I take is just like telling people what I'm seeing in their nature and in their response and giving them an opportunity to either reset that or to step away because I'm just not going to go back and forth with you.
I'm just not gonna go back and forth with you. And
Mm-mm.
that and that's
Reclaiming my time, as Maxine said, reclaiming my time.
and that's a word. I love this conversation, girl. We could
Me
talk about
too.
this
I
all
know.
day. We might have to have
It's a
part
whole
two.
kiki. I love it.
I want to chat with you a little bit about your recent role and recent partnership with Disney Plus.
Yes.
You can talk more about, those conversations, but, how did this start and what can people expect from the conversations that you've had with the platform?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is like it still feels very surreal when I'm like, I can't believe I host a Disney Plus YouTube show. But
Mm-hmm.
it started because two Black women who work at Disney Plus pitched the show internally and we're just sort of like, I think that we need an opportunity for the animators and the writers and the directors of these awesome pieces of content to explain their projects. Like no one knows it better than them. No one knows their intentions better than them. And we have some amazing work in the pipeline and we should give them a chance to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept became Bridging the Gap specifically because it was like, okay, well, how can we support families who are going to watch these shows together and continuing the conversations from there? So if you're watching Raya and the Last Dragon, for example, which centers around a young South Asian woman, then you can not only watch the show and your kids, love the songs, but
Mm-hmm.
then you can have a conversation with them about the themes that were touched on in the film. And so that was how the series is pitched. And they were just like, all right, so we need somebody to host this. And we need this person to be an activist or at least fluent in like politics
Okay.
because we're going to have each episode be about a different topic. And we need them to be able to kind of bounce around from those topics very easily versus us needing to kind of teach them each time. And so I got put on the short list of people that they wanted to come in and audition. So I did a virtual audition that went
Okay.
well. And then they, were like, okay, come to LA and be a part of this pilot. And it was really exciting because it was the first time being talent in that way and
Mm-hmm.
getting to go to LA and be on a set. And it was just such a magical experience because I think that people know, like, okay, there's a lot more Disney, like, diverse Disney princesses or diverse storylines where the princess is not focused on love
Mm-hmm.
and she's actually focused on sisterhood or she's focused on family or she's focused on community or whatever the case may be. And
Yes.
it's just an opportunity to talk about that even more. So I was so excited, but also like not really knowing how Hollywood works. And
Uh-huh.
so it was just the pilot, and that was last year. And I was like, okay, I don't know if they're going to pick it up and if this is going to go anywhere further, but I was just glad to be a part of that. And then at the top of this year, they were like, okay, the show is getting picked up. It's going to be a monthly series, and the first episode comes out in January. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So the first episode is already out, and the
Okay.
next episode comes out a week from when we're filming this. And I can give you a little spoiler that the next piece of content that we are talking about is the Proud Family reboot, which I'm so hyped
Yes.
about.
So hype.
And so we're going to be talking to the creator of the Proud Family, some of the writers and animators on it. And it is just so mind blowing to hear from these creatives what they intended to do, how they're
Mm-hmm.
updating this show that like we grew up on, right? And like
Yes.
making it
Yes.
relevant to newer audiences, but also still nostalgic for us.
Yes.
So yeah, it's such a dream come true. And again, just like another opportunity and platform for me to have these conversations on like a huge, huge brand like Disney Plus.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. What an exciting opportunity. Like
Yeah.
when I saw that, I was like, yes, girl, you better. Like you better be in
Ah,
that room.
yes. Oh
Oh,
my gosh. I was
yeah.
so shocked. Like, honestly, if I'm being super transparent, I was just like, I know I can do this, I
Yes.
don't know if Disney Plus is ready for a host like me. I mean, I'm a queer Black woman. I'm also very outspoken, as we've already talked about. I, have abolitionist in my bio. And I was like, I'm not interested in changing myself for this show. If at
Right.
any point you all are going to ask me to stop talking about certain things on my own social media channels because I'm hosting this show, don't
Yes.
give me the job. And they were
Right.
like, girl, we knew who you were when we asked you to audition. We did the
Uh-huh.
background checks. We're interested. Let's do this. And I think for me, that also signaled like, wow, look at the evolution of these brands. Like, I mean, no tea, no shade, but like Disney was a company that half a century ago was not even letting women work at the company, and now has a queer Black woman as a host of a YouTube series. And I'm not the only one. There's another YouTube series called What's Up Disney Plus that has a Black male host and a queer Latina host. And there are
Okay.
so many amazing pieces of content that they're pushing out. And it just really excites me that we're getting to a place where we can be authentic and be ourselves and still create beautiful bodies of work.
And that I was also going to bring that up, about how you felt about being in that space just because of the history of Disney.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that you see that there's hope there, but there's also, you know, opportunity there for you to be like, okay, I understand what the history of this company is, but
Right.
I'm in the room now and I'm not about to change now that I'm on
Right.
the
Exactly.
platform. So I'm glad you did your research. I'm glad that you know
Oh,
who I
yeah.
am and you don't want me to change.
Hmm.
And I love that you're standing your ground in that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. Like, we have to have integrity. And
Mhm.
especially in a world where, I think a lot of people are branding themselves through social media. And I
Mhm.
think there's nothing wrong with being compensated for the work that you are doing. I think there's nothing wrong about being vocal about the work that you're doing. But I
Yes.
do feel that sometimes people say that their values are one thing, and then they collaborate with brands who do not match those values and never talk about it as if
Okay.
like we don't know it. You know what I mean? And so I've
Mhm.
seen that in some places where I'm just like, how do you justify working with them?
Right.
And if, it's important for me to say, like, this is how I do that. Like,
Mhm.
I am clear about who I am going to be when I come into this show. I'm clear
Mhm.
about the things that I will and will not say on that show.
Okay.
And I'm excited to be on a set that is really affirming. Like there are so many Black women on the set. There is a woman of color who does the hair and makeup and who knows how to work with locks, and like it's
Love
so
that.
important to me that those things be really prevalent, and that I'm
Mhm.
not quiet about the things that I want to see, but also
Mhm.
that I'm very clear that like if I need to speak up about an issue in my community, I will. And I
Yeah.
will not let anybody silence me. And I think there are really beautiful examples of people who've done that, like Mark Lamont Hill, who was fired from CNN for speaking
Mhm.
out about Palestine. And it was
Yeah.
so important for me to see, like, wow, he was willing to lose that job to
Mhm.
maintain his integrity. And that's really important because if you won't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Bria, this has been one of my favorite conversations.
This time
Oh
just flew. I'm like, wait, no,
I
what?
know. No, I'm like looking at the time. I'm like, wait, I don't want her to leave, but
Right.
like, I know you have to go. But thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and just everything you're doing. I am like watching from the sidelines, like cheering you on in my heart and in my comments. I hope you feel it
Yes.
because I'm with
I
you
do.
and I love what you're doing. And I can't wait to see how you continue to just blossom this gift and this passion that you have, inspiring other people. It's so inspiring to me. And I hope you come back.
Oh, girl, that is like without question, definitely anytime, anywhere, let me know. And just thank you because I do feel that from you, and not just towards me, but you are just so positive and you put out energy into the world that like I think people sleep on just how much we can be changed by changing ourselves. And there's
Yeah.
so many people who talk about wanting to live in a better world and then just have the nastiest attitudes and are so competitive and do not want to lift up other people of color or other women. And it is just so beautiful for me to see you as a Black woman who's just like, no, I'm here to champion your voice and to give you a
Yeah.
space to talk and to be positive and out there. And I love the energy that you bring forth. So this
Thank you.
is just the beginning of a beautiful sisterhood. I know it. And
Yeah. That
yeah, I'm
means a
really
lot,
excited.
girl. That means a lot, especially coming from you. And like you said, whatever's on the inside, it's gonna shine through.
Yes, yes.
gonna shine through. So before you go, where can people find you? How can they support you and follow you?
So on most of my social media platforms, I am at Freckled While Black. That is my handle on Instagram and TikTok. Freckled with the L, while black. And then you can also just check me out on my website, breabaker.com, for people who are kind of looking to collaborate with me in a deeper way. Yeah, and then just stay connected. Anywhere that you are connected to the work and activism, you'll be connected to me through spirit. So just in your local community, find a group that is doing this work. If there's not one in your local community doing that work, start that. And yeah, I'm excited to build with y'all and connect with y'all.
Amen to that. Thank you, Bria. I'm so happy to have you. You have to come back, especially when that book comes out.
Yes.
I'm going to hold you to it.
Definitely.
So, thank you so much for joining me today. And I know everyone's going to be inspired by everything you had to share.
Thank you, sis.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.